Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I just, Instagram only lets me go live for an hour, man. And I can talk for a lot longer than an hour. You guys know it. Thanks for joining me again. Sorry to be annoying. I know that it's a little obnoxious. I weighed myself the other day and I dropped to 96.6 pounds. How many calories should I eat to gain weight and not overwhelm my body? I would be eating every 2 hours on the dot. I would be eating at least 2,000 calories, if not 2,500. And I would be pounding starches because starches have you gain weight. Now, I recommend pounding starches from roots and not grains, just because grains tend to be a lot more inflammatory than starch, and you actually want to gain healthy weight. You don't want to gain inflammation weight. So I would just make sure you're eating metabolically supportive foods that are easily absorbed and digested. A lot of people think that when they start their healing journey that green foods and green vegetables and lots of salads are healthy, and I'm like, no, it's the literal opposite. Those things are actually very difficult to digest and break down. They provide very little nutrients just because they're so hard to break down. And so when you're trying to support yourself metabolically, whether you have weight to gain or weight to lose, they're the same issue, you guys. It's just your genetics being expressed. You need to make sure you're eating foods that can easily be broken down and easily digested. This is going to be like meats and broths and shellfish, dairy, eggs, roots and fruits, specifically fruits if you're trying to lose weight, and specifically starch if you're trying to gain weight. If you're trying to lose weight, a little starch here and there is not a problem, but you should mostly be focusing on fructose and sugar from dairy because those directly support glycogen stores in the liver and the muscles. Whereas when you eat starches, even from root vegetables, your blood sugar does react quite quickly. And so, you know, when you're trying to gain, I highly recommend focusing on starches, specifically lots of potatoes. And that is a way to get a girl to gain weight quick. Now, for someone that's trying to lose weight, I don't want you to think like, oh my gosh, potatoes are gonna make me gain weight. If you have one, medium-sized potato with some grass-fed butter and some protein on the side, it's probably not going to lead to weight gain as much as eating like 5 to 10 potatoes a day with grass-fed butter, which I would recommend you do. So, it's just important to be eating plenty of food that's easy to break down and digest, and stay away from those foods that are slow-moving, like really fibrous or bulky fibrous foods, like specifically cruciferous vegetables and leafy greens, because they don't really provide you with lots of nutrients, and they're going to be hard to break down and fill you up, so you can't actually consume foods that are going to help you gain weight. Is there a supplement you would recommend to every woman, or is it always specific to each woman? It's always specific to each woman. I try to actually keep supplements very conservative. A lot of practitioners are trained to implement as many supplements as necessary, but I started to notice that some women started to feel like crap when you implemented supplements, and I was like, I wonder if taking away their supplements would actually help them. And sure enough, a lot of women are coming to me on stacks and stacks of supplements that they've collected over the years, not really understanding why they're taking them. They heard so-and-so tell them to take it, so they're taking it. And I take them off all their supplements as long as their doctor's okay with it. And they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Like, why do I feel so much better? I'm like, maybe because your body has to process all of the things in that supplement plus the fillers, which tend to inflame your gut lining and cause dysbiosis, or the cell walls of your gut to start slowly going apart. So I try to keep supplements with fillers very little. I don't care if it's the most expensive nutraceutical on the planet. If it has magnesium stearate or tapioca starch in it, it's going to irritate your gut. And the more ingredients you're consuming, the more likely it is that your body's reacting to something with an inflammatory response. And so what I do with my women is I take them off all their supplements. I implement nutrient-dense supplements. So I think that oysters should be consumed once per week, whether in a raw form or a smoked form. Oysters should be treated as your multivitamin. And if you're like, I can't do oysters, I'm like, suck it down, girl. We don't go for taste around here. So it's going to be once a week. It's not going to be, don't be a crybaby. It's going to be okay. And eat it. Your great-grandmother, your great-great-grandmother, your great-great-great-grandmother, she probably ate foods just as nasty, if not nastier, and if she could do it, you could do it. That's the reason why you're here. So another thing that should be taken at least once or twice a week is grass-fed beef liver. Now, if you want to take it in a supplement form, that's fine. It's not as potent as if you were going to eat it or make your own raw supplements, which I'll have a recipe for making your own liver supplements and fully nourished. that's something you want to consume at least once a week as well. Those are both really nutrient dense. And then you want to get like as much nutrients from your food as possible. Do bone broths, gelatin, collagen. Those are my favorite things that are really gut supportive. If you put a lot of greens in your broth, you can put eggshells in your broth, chicken feet, bone marrow. I mean, you can make it a witch's brew, and it could be one of the most nutrient dense things you consume. And then you can consume your broth once a day, and there's your supplement. You're all done. Super easy, right? Vitamin A is an important thing, and that's why I really recommend dairy, and that's why I really recommend liver. So many women are deficient in vitamin A, partially why Accutane works so well with acne, because vitamin A helps the skin barrier, and some people are really deficient in vitamin A, and it can cause acne, it can cause cysts, it can cause skin issues. So I don't recommend taking vitamin A as a supplement, but instead taking vitamin A foods. And then you need vitamin D and vitamin K, but it's important for you to make vitamin D from the sun as much as possible. This is why if you can do like an incandescent light, or you can get out in the sunlight and make vitamin D that way, it's best. Taking a supplement doesn't actually take you through the therapeutic process of creating vitamin D. And then vitamin K is made by gut bacteria, but obviously most women's guts are effed up, and so they need vitamin K. I try to have you take it in a liquid underneath the tongue if possible, so you don't have to digest and break it down in the stomach or the intestine, because that could just lead to further irritation. And then the last thing is vitamin E. Vitamin E is really helpful, and it helps with estrogen detoxification in the liver. It also helps protect the liver from polyunsaturated fats. And polyunsaturated fats are what's responsible for fatty liver, slows down liver detoxification and metabolism in the liver, and slows down the metabolism of your body, your cells. So it's very important to make sure the liver is getting through those polyunsaturated fats very quickly and efficiently, and they're not affecting the body too much. They affect the body bad, but vitamin E can be protective against that. And then every other supplement is really relative on the person. So I like niacinamide, I like myo-inositol. I specifically like to use B vitamins therapeutically when possible, because I feel like they are gentle and they come with the lowest amount of cost. I try to use food-based supplements when possible, so like chlorophyll for liver detoxification, anything that's a tincture. Like when it comes to supplements, I really try to avoid pills as much as possible and use liquids and tinctures and things like that, because they're easily absorbed underneath the tongue. And then when it comes to gut healing supplements, that's going to be different for every single person. Supplements are very relative based on the person, and I try to keep them as conservative as possible. Because I know, okay, do you recommend any specific brands of collagen? Should I just look for grass-fed? Yeah, I would just recommend looking for grass-fed. I stick to Great Lakes collagen for the most part. I've been trying one called Zint, I believe, that I got on Amazon. I'm not sure about the quality. Like, they give you such a big bag for such a good price, and I'm like, ugh. I know Great Lakes got pretty popular and they raised their prices, so I don't know how expensive grinding up bones actually is. Usually things have come with quite a markup, so I'm sure grass-fed is grass-fed, but sometimes I get a little freaked out about it. So Great Lakes is my favorite brand. It's not as expensive as Vital Proteins, but it has gotten a little bit pricier over the years. I only have one hand. Broke my hand at work. Help. You only have one hand? I don't know. I'm so sorry that you broke your hand at work, but I'm not sure what you're asking. Nestor preferred bone broth when you can't make at home. Best. I knew that was a typo. Best preferred bone broth when you can't make at home. Kettle and Fire is okay. Bonafide is okay. I'm trying to think of what else. Bonafide, which is sold at most health food stores like Sprouts and Roots, is okay. And then Kettle and Fire, which is sold at Costco, is okay. It's in a box. But it is best to make your own when possible. It's not that hard to make. You literally throw bones, eggshells. I literally don't even take a knife or a cutting board out. I literally take celery, break it in half like the Hulk I am, and put it in the broth. Break apart carrots with tops and everything, roughly chop an onion, put it in there, I actually just did pull out a knife for that. Garlic, ginger. I don't make it a big process. Like, people try to make things so complicated these days, and I'm like, dude, like, you cannot overcomplicate it or you won't do it. So my broth takes me overall probably less than 10 minutes to put together. You fill that pot with water, you put a splash of apple cider vinegar, and you just let it simmer for 24 to 48 hours, depending on the type of bones, and it's done. And then you just strain it. So, and I just recommend making a huge batch, putting it in mason jars, individual size if you're going to do it daily, or big 1 liter jars if you're going to use it for recipes, and keep it in the freezer. So then you just defrost one the night before, you wake up in the morning, there's your supplement, you're done. But making your own broth is one of the easiest and most beneficial things because you can really control what's in it. But if you are pressed for time or can't make your own, Kettle and Fire, Bonafide is fine. There's some other brands out there, I just can't think of them. But as long as it's high quality bones, that's the thing, is like a lot of bone broths on the market are not as high quality as I would prefer. And so it's like, you're kind of exchanging quality for the convenience. And that's fine in some cases when you're pressed for time, but you don't want to do it always. Can PCOS cause uterine scar tissue? Estrogen can cause uterine scar tissue. Sorry, this white line always bugs me, you guys. You know how it is. It can cause uterine scarring, or estrogen is very inflammatory to the reproductive organs, including the ovaries and the uterus. What workouts can I do? Oh, with your hand being broken? Okay, now I get it. So, nothing that puts pressure on your hands. Squats, lunges, walking. There's so many things that you can do without using your hands for exercise. Just don't do anything that puts stress on your hands. I am so hairy everywhere, face and body, but my hormone test came back normal. Doctor told me it's genetic. Could it be true? My mom is not hairy at all. Yeah, if you don't have hairy people in your genetics, it's weird that somebody tells you it's genetic. Like, I love how when doctors can't explain something, they're like, it's just genetic. I'm like, okay. Like, pass. Hard pass, dude. So body hair is mistakenly thought that it's caused by testosterone, but I don't think that's the case. It can be caused by growth hormone, it can be caused by prolactin, and it can be caused by thyroid issues. So those are all things that need to be tested when you have body hair growth. Also, cortisol and adrenaline should not be overlooked because stress hormones can cause body hair growth as well as estrogen. So, a lot of hormones can cause the hair follicles and to become overworked. So I would look into hormones. A lot of times when people are like, my hormone test came back normal, I'm like, well, what hormones did you test? Because did you test the right ones? A lot of times doctors don't know what to test in the first place. And so how can they test the right hormones and know if something's up if they're only testing one thing? How can I increase my low progesterone levels? I've been spotting brown since February. I have a highlight actually labeled progesterone that talks about why you might have low progesterone. It could be two things. You're either not ovulating, or if you are ovulating, your corpus luteum is struggling. And your corpus luteum relies upon nutrients. Your corpus luteum relies upon proper thyroid function. So many different things. And so if you're having a long follicular phase or you're not ovulating at all, there's stress going on that's preventing you from ovulating. And now it's just finding out what that barrier to ovulation is. Is it hypothyroidism or low T3 syndrome? Is it not eating enough? Is it, people largely underestimate EMFs. So are you sleeping next to your Wi-Fi? Are you next to a cell tower? Is there a reformer next to where you live? Those are all things that need to be asked. And people are always like, what can I do about that? And I'm like, unfortunately, the only thing you can do about your Wi-Fi is really unplug it at night. If you want to hardwire your house, you can do that. I'm getting ready to do that. But when it comes to like cell towers and things like that, I'm like, unfortunately, we live in a world where when you're shopping for a house, you need to be aware of the surrounding environment before you purchase something, or you are going to set yourself up for failure. So like, look at your environmental factors. There's so many different things, but think of a lack of ovulation or a lack of progesterone as a stress issue. How do you cook your beef liver? Unfortunately, as much as I talk about eating beef liver, I've cooked it in many different ways and I've choked it down, but I have not found something that I love other than just putting it into food. So like, I'll cut it into very small pieces and put it into a meatloaf or meatballs. I'll cut it into very small pieces and cook it into taco meat and make tacos out of it. Like, I'll like hide it with flavor and stuff, and it's also like shh, so everyone will eat it. But I have tried it cooked in butter with onions and some bacon. It was tolerable. It was not something that, the texture is what gets me. I'm like, okay, let's do this, Jessica. Let's just eat it down. You only have to do a few bites, but it's not pleasant in my opinion. Some people love it, and more power to them. I recommend starting with chicken livers. They're a lot milder than beef liver. And trying like a pate, see if you like that. I'm trying just mixing it, like cook some bacon in a cast iron skillet with some onions and then just slice it up and cook it like steak. It looks just like steak, honestly. Like if you can get over the actual grossness of preparing it. And then if not, just cut it into tiny pieces and mix it in with your ground beef and see if you can tolerate it there. If not, I just actually will cut mine into little small swallowable size pieces, freeze it on a cookie sheet on parchment paper, and then I'll just swallow that raw liver frozen every single day, and that's my homemade supplement. When you say sugar is beneficial, do you mean like fruit sugar and grain? I'm assuming not processed sugar. I'm actually talking about sugar. So even organic sugar can be therapeutic in some cases. Obviously, like organic cane sugar has less nutrients than like something like raw honey or coconut sugar or date syrup, but I have to help people get around that mindset that sugar might not be as bad for us as we think, and sugar can actually be metabolically healing. You have to understand that sugar is a very, very energy rich substance, and the body needs what it needs, the proper hormonal balance and the proper amount of nutrients in order to be able to actually burn sugar properly, or it will just get stored. And so sugar, and I'm talking all sugar, but mostly fruit and roots. I say stick to fruits and roots mostly, especially if you're trying to lose weight, but a little bit of actual concentrated sugar can go a long way. I recommend kind of staying away from legume carbs or starches specifically because they're very hard to break down, and most grain starches can be hard to break down as well. They can cause inflammation. If your grains are very processed and you tend to tolerate them well gut-wise, they can be okay. Like, for example, like a gluten-free bread made with white rice flour or something like that. Sometimes that can be okay. But I tend to recommend sticking to roots and fruits. Also the sugar in dairy. That's why I'm so pro dairy, you guys. It's a perfect balanced food. It has saturated fat in it, which is wonderful for the metabolism. It has whey and casein for protein, which is anti-stress. It lowers stress hormones. And it also has lactose, or a very digestible and liver supportive sugar in it. So the sugar from fruits and the sugar from dairy tend to be the most metabolically supportive, and then after that comes root vegetables or starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes and plantains and things like that. And then, you know, grains and legumes are kind of at the bottom of the barrel for me. They tend to cause a lot more inflammation than they're worth, but they can be fun to eat sometimes. I mean, actually, for me, beans are not fun to eat. I just never eat them because, like, why? But for grains, I'll sometimes do, like, gluten-free bread or white rice or something like that. You mentioned that you use progesterone pill. Can I get the name of it? And do you think a pill is better than the cream? The pill, I just get bioidentical progesterone compounded from a compound pharmacy. My doctor has to prescribe it for me. So pills are usually not available over the counter. The only thing I've ever heard over the counter progesterone-wise is progesterone creams and something called Progest E, which is a drop. It's in vitamin E oil, and you drop it underneath the tongue. Progest E, if you type it in on Google, it's on 2 supplement websites that are more like smaller family business owned supplement websites. They look kind of shady compared to Amazon, but they're not, I promise. I've bought from both of them. So Progest E can also be a great place to get progesterone. Top tips for severe PCOS and hypothyroidism. The only thing that works for me is the pill, but what to go fully natural? Yeah, so I mean, I have like literally my whole profile is devoted to top tips for severe PCOS and hypothyroidism because that's what I had, and so that's how I learned. So I would recommend like going through all the information here, specifically my most recent stuff. I would recommend, starting with easy to digest and absorb foods, broths, gelatin, collagen, fruits and roots, staying away from really hard to digest foods like leafy greens and nuts and cruciferous vegetables in excess, and really staying to the easy to digest, soothing for the digestive tract foods. Coconut oil is specifically helpful. Staying away from industrial seed oils, especially like soybean and canola, safflower, sunflower, that kind of thing, can be super beneficial for both thyroid and PCOS. I personally think that hypothyroidism drives PCOS. So what's going to be beneficial for the thyroid is going to be beneficial for PCOS as well. And just lowering stress in general. Getting your stress hormones down is so essential, both like environmentally, so just removing toxic people from your life, stop working a job you hate, or at least start to make plans to change that. You know, like get your environment right for healing, and then also work on nutrient-dense foods, gut soothing, because remember, the gut plays a huge role in hormonal issues, you guys. If you're not detoxing estrogen well from the gut, you can't expect to have enough progesterone to balance all the estrogen recirculating into your body. So gut and hormones are intimately connected and need to be focused on both. If you're not digesting food properly, or it's slowly moving through your digestive tract, or you have a bunch of kale in your poop when you poop, like your body's obviously not able to break that down. Stop forcing it. So you really need to listen to your body and start implementing one small tip at a time. But that's why I'm coming out with Fully Nourished, you guys. Like, I wish I could give it to you in bullet points, but learning how to heal your body is a little bit more complicated than that. I used to crash at 7 p.m. just exhausted, so I got off coffee, but now I have a problem going to bed until like 10. Is this normal energy, or do you think I still have sleeping or adrenal issues? If you're sleeping well and you're waking up feeling rested, that might be the fact that you actually have energy to get through the whole day. If you're waking up feeling really unrested, or like you didn't really sleep well, or you're very fatigued throughout the day, then I would look into adrenal issues. But if you're sleeping through the night and you're waking up feeling rested, I would say that that's an improvement. What's happening when you have dark patches on inner thighs, armpits, and face? Yeah, so a lot of times if you have the darkening of the skin, that happens especially in the armpits or the groin area where the thighs kind of meet, that is usually actually due to estrogen. I actually struggled with that for a while. It was a little bit embarrassing for me, especially when you're, you know, like you feel really embarrassed to wear a bikini or anything like that, because the skin got so dark around my thighs. But actually supplementing with bioidentical progesterone was super helpful for that, as well as just focusing on my liver detoxification. I realized, at least in my personal case, it was due to an estrogen issue. And a lot of times that's why women with PCOS get darkening of the skin. It's because they have too much estrogen in relationship to progesterone. That's actually why melasma happens on the face. If you read a birth control insert, it says it's not safe to lay in the sun when you're on birth control. It's not safe to go into a UV tanning bed, and you can still develop dark spots without doing those things because the estrogen in the pill causes dark spots. So it's really important, you guys, when you're on a medication, to just read the pamphlet and the insert. You'll find out a lot of information that you didn't really know. Thoughts on autoimmune paleo diet for Hashimoto's? I'm about 10 pounds overweight, feeling so fatigued and digestive issues. If you support it, is there a cookbook you recommend? I literally hate the autoimmune paleo diet. I think it is so horrible. If you want to do a symptom suppressing diet, that's what you do. So many people are talking about AIP, and then I see them have, like, they've been strict AIP for 3 years, and they're like, I'm still struggling with flare-ups. And I'm like, because your metabolism is so freaking slow due to your restrictive diet. I despise it, you guys. Every person that I've seen on an autoimmune paleo diet has come to me in literal metabolic distress. Sometimes their temps are as low as like 95 degrees. And I'm like, holy moly. Did your body at any time say, hey, can I have some carbs? Hey, can I have some potatoes? Hey, can I have like something else besides these very restrictive foods? Like, the whole goal of a restrictive diet is to be helpful for a specific therapeutic period of time, and then you have to implement foods back in. I shouldn't say it's the worst diet, but it's pretty restrictive, and it doesn't get the point. Like, the person that created autoimmune paleo doesn't get the point. I like that it's nut free. That's very important. But I like that it's supportive of the gut. And I like that it doesn't include very inflammatory foods. That's important. But you don't have to be AIP to do that. And that's actually what I'll be teaching in Fully Nourished. I believe that like green vegetables and cruciferous vegetables eaten in excess prevent the gut from healing. Because look at them. They're so fibrous and irritating. And think about like taking a bunch of kale. I just want you to do an experiment. Start rubbing that against your skin very, very hard and very, very fast. See how that feels on your skin, and then picture that literally happening inside your body on very delicate digestive tissue, and tell me what you feel. And your gut's like, help me, and you're like, eat kale. It doesn't work. So I think there are aspects of the autoimmune paleo diet that are helpful, but then there's also things that are not completely understood, and so people are on restrictive diets for a long time, or they're not eating enough. It's very difficult to eat enough on an autoimmune paleo diet, so you actually damage the thyroid worse. I personally think that the liver should be focused on, getting balanced, nutrient-dense meals that are easy to digest should be focused on, and clearing out the small intestine of all bacteria should be focused on when it comes to a thyroid issue. And you'll see your Hashimoto's get so much better, so much quicker. What shakes do you use? Shakeology made me nauseous and puke. I also can't have caffeine. Yeah, Shakeology is a scam. I don't use protein shakes. If like a client really wants a protein shake, I'll recommend like a high quality microfiltered whey, like a high quality whey supplement. But I don't think that protein powders are very healthy. They're just very processed. When you extract a protein from a food, you can't expect your body to recognize it or digest or absorb it like it would a regular food. And so I recommend getting most of your protein from your food or doing bone broth. Raw milk is a wonderful natural protein drink, you guys, that comes with all your vitamins and minerals. And also you can do collagen and gelatin. So that's what I use for protein powder. Like if I'm making a shake or a smoothie or something like that, I just add collagen to it, and that's my protein. Haha, how many oysters? I recommend doing a can of smoked oysters or like 5 to 7 raw oysters. On bioidentical progesterone, I notice I have more energy and hungrier. Is this a sign my metabolism and thyroid is being healed? I wouldn't say like being healed, but remember that progesterone promotes glucose metabolism. It helps your cells work better because they're less inflamed. That's why it helps with insulin resistance, because progesterone is anti-inflammatory, and inflammation is what causes your cells to be resistant to insulin in the first place. And so that's why progesterone really helps with metabolic function. It does promote thyroid function, so you'll find you're a lot hungrier on progesterone, which is a good thing. Remember, appetite is a gauge for how well your body is using fuel. The more fuel your body is asking for, the more efficiently it's using it. So I would say that's a pretty good sign. Yeah. What's the difference between bioidentical pregnenolone and progesterone? Is one better to take over the other? They're used for very different issues. So pregnenolone is that master hormone that is very helpful when you're under a lot of stress. Some people find that it's very helpful. Some people do not. I recommend if you're going to experiment with pregnenolone that you really start very, very conservative, like at the smallest dose you can possibly find, and maybe even cut that in half and then work your way up. Progesterone is something that your body makes when you ovulate, and so it has a completely different role in the body. It's anti-inflammatory, anti-estrogenic. It helps your body balance out estrogen, but they're made for two different things. And remember, like the post that I did the other day, is that pregnenolone needs T3 to be converted into progesterone. So if you have a progesterone problem and you're taking pregnenolone expecting it to convert, you better have enough T3 to make that conversion. I've been on birth control for 8 years now, and it's my only option. The other options don't have the hormones to help my PMDD, but I'm concerned when I go to have a baby, I'm not going to be able to. When you have PMDD, a lot of times it's actually due to low progesterone, which makes me annoyed that doctors are not as schooled on how powerful progesterone can be. And so instead they prescribe something that completely cuts off your ability to make progesterone. But I completely understand about birth control being your lifeline. Remember that it has synthetic hormones, and your body is very capable of making hormones. It just probably wasn't before you got on the pill, and so that's why you felt better when you went on the pill. But that doesn't mean that the pill's fixing the issue. It's just covering it up like a band-aid. But it's super important after the pill to not just get pregnant right away. You really want to make sure you restore all the nutrients lost while you're on the pill, because that is something that is a fact. The pill depletes you of nutrients and causes metabolic damage. And so you need to make sure that your thyroid is fully functioning and you have all the nutrients needed to create a healthy fetus and to grow a healthy baby, or your baby is going to be the one that suffers. And this is not me trying to scare you. This is just facts. So I really recommend checking out Dr. Jolene Brighton's book, Beyond the Pill. I think that would be very helpful for you to just understand what's going on, understand what to do, so when you're ready to have a baby, you're prepared as to what you need to do. But that's a book I highly recommend in your case. When I was on a combination birth control, my hair went from a curly frizzy mess to straight, smooth, and shiny. Now that I'm off the birth control, it is back to a frizzy, dry mess. What could help with this? Would magnesium? So you have to understand that when you cut off your thyroid function, it affects your hair follicles. And sometimes that actually is not a good sign, even though you felt like your hair was better. But it could also be due to low progesterone. So let's say your hair was really bad beforehand and it's bad after, I would suspect it's a progesterone issue, because progesterone is pro-hair. So, you know, getting to the bottom of where your progesterone levels are at, and yeah, magnesium can help you make progesterone, but it's more of a complicated issue. You have to make sure that when you were on the pill, your thyroid function wasn't being suppressed, which can actually straighten your hair. So people are like, well, like, or it could do the opposite, so vice versa. Some people get really like curly, frizzy hair when their thyroid dysfunction is off, or their thyroid function is off, and some people get like smooth, straight hair, so it just kind of depends. So that's not always a good thing. If your hair changes, that shows that something's very deeply changing within the hair follicle. But I would check my progesterone levels if that's something that's really concerning you, and my thyroid levels. But magnesium could maybe help. It's just not like a whole, that's like, it's probably a huge complicated issue. It's not just one thing. I'm so excited for your channel. Let's get you to 10,000 followers. Yes, I'm super appreciative if you guys just share as much as possible. I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers so I can have you guys swipe up, because I'd really like to share more things with you. Like, I want to make you guys a Spotify playlist, and I want to make you guys, like, I want to be able to link a bunch of stuff and like have you just swipe up instead of hit the link in my bio. So I've just been praying for the 10,000. I've been manifesting it in my head. What is the best form of dairy? I don't like milk or cheese, but I can stomach it when I need to. So how would you recommend getting in dairy? Well, I mean, if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. It's just more of that thing, like a lot of people cut it out because they think it's really bad for them and they really enjoy dairy. So I wouldn't like, you don't need to eat it. But if you like it, that's another thing. But if you don't like it, there's no need to really consume it too much. I would just make sure you're being very conscious of where you're getting your calcium from. But yeah, like Greek yogurt can be good, ricotta cheese, homemade cream cheese, or cream cheese without guar gum, you know, any dairy products. Can the dark spots go away? Yeah, they can. My dark spots went away. I mean, my armpit is hairy, but it's not dark anymore. Can't wait for Fully Nourished. Me neither, you guys. I've been working on it nonstop when I have time, like chunks of time, and I'm like literally like I cannot work fast enough. I'm just ready for it to get out. But it does take steps. Like I have to, you know, record the videos and make the slides and make the handouts and make the recipe book, and like each step has to get done, and I'm like, oh my gosh, just please. Any food to be avoided at all with PCOS, like completely? Industrial seed oils. And if it were me, I always say casual avoidance, but I would avoid nuts, at least high consumption of nuts. They're so irritating, you guys, and they have so much polyunsaturated fats, which totally impair your glucose metabolism. So if you're trying to actually lose weight and get metabolically functioning and support your thyroid, nuts are not your friend. But neither is alcohol, and neither is industrial seed oils. I avoid industrial seed oils at all costs. Like when I have to eat them, I'm just like, oh my God, like help me. I'm like, I pray, dear Lord, for my liver and my cells. And because it's like, it's a product of our industrial revolution, you guys, and they were toxins once. They were actually put into oil-based paints, and then once oil-based paints had to be switched over to water-based paints, they had to figure out where they were going to put things like flaxseed oil and canola oil and soybean oil. So they're like, where should we put these things we were previously using for paints? Why don't we just put it into the food? That sounds like a great plan. Let's make an industry out of it. And so industrial seed oils were born. What's a good starting dose of bioidentical progesterone capsule? I usually recommend going as low as you possibly can. So if you can like cut something in half and half and then half again, that's a great start. You can always slowly increase something. A lot of women are like, go big or go home, and they just start taking the full dose of something right away, and that's like the worst thing for us. So you really just want to start low with something that you feel comfortable with, and then slowly work your way up. But you would start as low as possible. What about the hormones in the milk that come from the injections to the cows? Yeah, that's why I encourage you to drink high quality milk, like organic and pasture raised when possible, but at least organic. My body stopped ovulating when I was 23. What can I do to make them work again? Like I said, you really want to watch my progesterone story, and you want to understand that stress prevents ovulation. So you have to get to the bottom of what's causing stress. Were you over-exercising, not eating enough? Did you cut out meat? Did you cut out dairy? Did you cut out like, that's pretty much the biggest things. And then you want to make sure that your thyroid is high functioning. A lot of women develop hypothyroidism without realizing it, and their thyroid is under functioning and it stops them from ovulating. So it's important to get TSH, T4, and T3 checked. But you have to get to the bottom of the stress that's preventing you from ovulating. I've had a 36-day cycle for about a year, haven't been on birth control, but also concerned about not being able to get pregnant when I'm ready. Tips for shortening the cycle. I wouldn't worry so much about shortening your cycle as it is that just making sure that you're ovulating. You know, an optimal luteal phase should last from 12 to 14 days. Anything less than that is usually going to lead to low progesterone. So you want your corpus luteum lasting you a good, 11 to 14 days. If you're having a long follicular phase, you're ovulating later in your cycle, and then you're having a short luteal phase, like for example, 7 days, you're ovulating on let's say you're ovulating on day 29, then that's a problem. That's a long follicular phase. But if you're having, a long luteal phase, then I wouldn't worry about it. I would just work on supporting your body, loving on your body, giving your body what it needs, lowering stress, supporting your metabolism, and your body will do the rest. So that is totally dependent on when you're ovulating and how long your luteal phase is lasting for you to know if that's normal or not. But I actually think a longer cycle is a better cycle. My BBT is always in the 96 to low 97 range. Is this normal or a sign of a thyroid issue? Yeah, unfortunately, that's a suppressed thyroid function. So you always want it to be 97.8 to 98.6. I would want it to be more towards the 98.6 for optimal, but you absolutely need it to be above 97.8, 97.8. What type of magnesium supplement do you recommend? I actually usually have my clients take a Epsom salt bath once a week with 2 pounds of Epsom salts and stay in there for at least 30 minutes to absorb it, and then use magnesium oil on the skin before they go to bed. If you need to take a supplement, usually magnesium supplements are irritating to the gut, honestly, but if you want to take a supplement, I'll do like Natural Calm magnesium citrate powder, or if that gives you too loose of stools, then I would do like a magnesium glycinate. I started bioidentical hormone replacement therapy after a year of being off the pill and not getting my period back. I'm 33 and have had 2 successful pregnancies. Worries after 4 months of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and still no period if there is. Still a possibility to regain my cycle. Well, it just really depends on what hormones you replaced. A lot of people make the mistake to replace estrogen, which is not a good idea. If you need to make estrogen or you have low estrogen, I would supplement progesterone first to make sure that low progesterone is not preventing estrogen from being detoxified from the tissues properly. A lot of times once women implement progesterone, they check their estrogen levels again and oop, there it is. Estrogen is getting out of the tissues now, and so their estrogen is fine, not realizing that they didn't need estrogen in the first place. There's plenty of estrogen. It was just a movement issue. It's being stored in the tissues. So it really depends on what bioidentical hormones you replaced to know if there's a possibility to regain your cycle. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to progesterone supplementation, if a woman's ovulating, I recommend, sometimes progesterone therapy can affect you from ovulating. Sometimes it can stop you from ovulating. And so if you're ovulating, sometimes it can be helpful to wait until after you ovulate to start supplementing progesterone. A lot of doctors will just say across the board, day 14 up until your period. And they won't tell you like it's important to wait until after you ovulate and then supplement progesterone. So I personally don't have that problem. Like some women can take progesterone and still ovulate, but some women can't. And so it's important to kind of know your own body. But there's always an answer. Someone that's 33 years old can absolutely get their period back. It might take a little work. It really depends on how long you guys are on the pill. If you've been on the pill long term, like more than a decade, there's a lot more work that needs to be done than someone that's been on the pill for 5 months. So long-term use usually leads to domino effect of breakdown, and you have to kind of slowly reverse the damage that was done on your hormones, and it can take time, and it takes the proper strategic implementation of things. Just slapping bioidentical hormones on it is not the answer. It takes a multitude of things. And long-term birth control use depletes you of nutrients, specifically nutrients you need to ovulate. And so if you're being depleted of nutrients and you don't replenish those nutrients, you're going to have a problem ovulating regardless of if you're taking the right hormones or not. Does high FSH always mean early menopause, or is there another reason? I have 2 kids and in mid-30s. You would want your FSH to be lower, but usually FSH is high due to stress. It doesn't always mean early menopause, but if it continues to stay high and you continue to let your stress go unchecked, then it could mean early menopause. Because menopause just happens when you stop making enough progesterone and you stop cycling. And remember, when you go through menopause, there are other tissues that make you estrogen. Skin makes estrogen, fat cells make estrogen, a million things make estrogen, but only the ovaries and the adrenals in small amounts make progesterone. And so you need progesterone when you go through menopause. And so make sure your progesterone levels are optimal and make sure your stress hormones are low and watch your FSH change. Have you heard of royal jelly for increasing estrogen? Yeah, I mean, I saw Dr. Jolene Brighton just make a post on that. But when we start to get in with all these obscure things, you guys, we have to understand the foundational things that matter. I mean, you can come up with this huge supplement graveyard. You can have 18 different things that you're taking, and you're not getting to the foundational root of the issue, which you're not eating enough. You're not eating enough of the right nutrients. You're irritating your gut lining every time you eat. You're not sleeping well. You're surrounded by stressful people. You follow a bunch of women on Instagram that make you feel like shit about yourself. You compare your body to everybody and their mom. You hate yourself. Like, I could go on and on. All those things are going to trump royal jelly. So I really recommend getting the foundational things figured out, and then you can start implementing and trying different things like royal jelly and supplements and things like that. But usually they're not that effective if you're not doing the things that need to happen in order for your body to feel safe. Sorry, my phone froze. What are your thoughts on AIP diet for Hashimoto's? Yeah, I went on and on about it for like 10 minutes, so I would go back and watch it. But I pretty much said I'm not a fan because it's very restrictive. There are certain aspects of it that are great, but certain aspects that are not so great. And a lot of people that follow the AIP diet don't really understand the point, which is you're supposed to only be on restrictive diets for a short period of time, and then you should be able to digest and implement other foods. And if you go back to implementing and digesting other foods and you can't do it, that diet didn't heal you. It was just suppressing your symptoms. When will Fully Nourished come out? On my latest post, I said I will be announcing the official launch date next week. Like I said before, I'm not really sure exactly. I have to wait for my assistant to get back from vacation, though, to be able to handle the customer service and things like that. Just started testing glucose per doc recommendation. However, not really sure where my number should be at before or after meals. So fasting glucose should usually be under 100, but the thing is about fasting glucose, I hate it as a reading because stress hormones like glucagon, cortisol, adrenaline, prolactin can all affect blood glucose levels. And those are usually really high in the morning when somebody has hormone imbalances or hormonal issues. So I really recommend doing postnatal glucose or post-meal glucose about 1 to 2 hours after meals to really see how your body's clearing glucose. But measuring your blood glucose does really nothing for you except for showing you that you're not metabolizing glucose properly. That's why I always recommend measuring pulses and temps so much more than I recommend blood glucose. It is an important marker, but measuring your blood glucose 3 times a day just shows you that your body's really bad at clearing glucose properly, or it's good at clearing glucose properly, whatever you're looking for. But it doesn't tell you the whole story. So some people check their blood glucose and they're like, oh, I'm good, I'm in the normal range, so it's good. And I'm like, that's not a great marker. You still don't know. But you want your blood glucose after meals to be under 130, preferably back to at least 100. I was told PCOS is a possibility, especially since I'm at risk for type 2 diabetes. Yes, so the pill, remember, damages the metabolism and increases the risk of type 2 diabetes. What are normal estrogen levels throughout a cycle? What is the lowest it should go? This is relative to the person. This is super relative. So you really have to look at your patterns more than you have to actually look at a certain specific number. What's high for one woman would be normal for another, and what's low for one woman would be normal for another. So it's really dependent. I think the lower, the better, honestly. You obviously don't want it too low, but you don't want to be pushing the high end of the range. But you have to know when you get your blood tests done where you are in your cycle. Some women send me blood tests and they're like, here's my hormone levels, and I'm like, where were you in your cycle? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, how? This is not helpful at all. If you don't know where you are in your cycle when you get your labs tested, it means nothing. It's meaningless. How do I control my sugars with a PCOS diet? Eat regular balanced meals that have protein, carb, and fat 5 times a day, 4 to 5 times a day. You just want to balance your blood sugar throughout the day. Hi, beautiful. Hi. My doctor prescribed me metformin today. Is that okay, you think? That is a decision you have to make for yourself, and trust your gut. I highly recommend before you implement a medication, when you pick it up from the pharmacy, do not take that pamphlet and throw it away. Take that pamphlet, open it up, and sit down for your nightly reading for 30 minutes and read through that pamphlet back to back, because you're right to be informed about what a medication does to your body. And it's not a rush to take it right now. So, take a week, marinate on it, get an idea of what you feel like it is right in your gut, and then make a decision then. But no one can make that decision for you except for you. My hair is falling out in chunks. Is there anything that just can stop the loss? Unfortunately, hair loss is a complex issue. It's usually caused by stress and inflammation. Thyroid issues is specifically a driver, especially in women with PCOS. Many times they have a thyroid issue. So, it's a multitude of issues that you need to get to the bottom of it. And it's not like one thing will really help it until you get your stress under control. What is an optimal level for progesterone tested on day 21? So, you have to know when you ovulated, because a lot of people assume that they ovulated on day 14. And so, if that's the case, your progesterone level at day 21 should be above 8 at least optimally. Or nanograms per deciliter, NG/DL, that's what it will look like. But, if you ovulated a day before that, you might not have high progesterone levels on day 21. And so you would technically have low progesterone, but if you got tested later on in the cycle, you might have high levels. But optimally, mid-luteal phase, you should have 8 nanograms per deciliter at least. Would you recommend a 16-8 fasting period for losing weight? Thank you. If you have hormonal imbalances, PCOS, anything like that, intermittent fasting is so horrible for your metabolism, you guys. So horrible. However, so a lot of people are like, but wait, intermittent fasting makes me feel so good. Why? Well, remember, the only thing that really comes from fasting is that you're starving bacteria that could be producing something called LPS, or lipopolysaccharides, or endotoxins, which get absorbed into the bloodstream and inflame the cells, which causes insulin resistance. So that's why fasting works, in my opinion. A lot of people are like, it helps with blood sugar balance and this and that. I'm like, because it's starving bacteria that's inflaming your cells. But it stresses your body out, because remember, when your body is not getting fuel here, it has to make fuel. And so fasting is a give and take situation. You're taking away one thing that causes metabolic stress by starving that bacteria, and you're giving your body another thing that causes stress, which is starving it. So I don't know. I see a lot of women rapidly lose weight doing intermittent fasting due to adrenaline levels being heightened, but eventually their hair starts falling out in chunks, and they start to get acne, and they start to get anxiety. And I've only seen intermittent fasting work well for one girl once, and then I come to find out that she doesn't have a period. So that's my experience with intermittent fasting. There's actually been women who have reported that intermittent fasting 16-8 for a year actually put them into menopause. They actually went through menopause at 27 years old. Isn't that crazy? So intermittent fasting is pretty stressful, and depending on where you are in your body, if you're already stressed out, it can be a huge stressor, and the benefits might not outweigh the negatives. So there are other ways to kill that nasty bacteria in your gut, and other ways to get your gut cleaned up without intermittent fasting. What if the glucose numbers are coming up low, like 85 post-meal? Is that too low? I have started to check temp and pulse too. Thank you. That is pretty low. That's weird. I would maybe check 2 hours after a meal and see where they're at. Maybe you're testing too soon after a meal. What if your digestion's working so slow that you're not absorbing that glucose until later on? So I would experiment with some different times and see where your glucose is at the 2 hour or 3 hour mark. Maybe you're digesting slow and that's not absorbing as quickly. Thank you, Jess. You're a wealth of information, and I'm so thankful to have found you. I'm thankful that you found me too. Thanks for being here. So in regards to the estrogen question, no period, so don't know my cycle. My levels last year were 0 to 50, increasing slowly, so they were 120 in Jan, and now back to not showing up at all again is so disheartening. So when it comes to suffering from amenorrhea or lack of a cycle, you have to be very diligent, because your doctor's not going to do this for you, is to get tested at the same time of your cycle every time you get tested, or it will be disheartening. disheartening, because there are certain times in your cycle where estrogen is very, very low naturally. If your levels were slowly increasing, because you know you're normal, and so now that you say, you know, it was from the 0 to 50 mark, and then it was increasing slowly to 120, and then now back to not showing up at all again, you know, you need to get tested around the same time. And when I say cycle, I know you don't have a cycle, but you still need to be testing around the same time, and going by that every 28-day cycle. Or you're just testing sporadically, and you don't know if your body's actually trying to get back to cycling. I've seen a lot of women who struggle with amenorrhea that are getting their hormones tested regularly, and their body's starting to pick it up. Their body's slowly starting to create more hormones and more hormones, but they had to test at the same time. There's still almost a cycle going on. Like, your body's still kind of slightly cycling, because remember, the female body wants to cycle. She's dying to cycle. That's what she does. So you kind of have to make sure you're going by a certain pattern. I recommend for people that struggle with a lack of a period to just go by the pattern of the moon. Decide if on the new moon or the full moon you're going to be menstruating, and if on the new moon or the full moon you're going to be ovulating, and just go by that, because the moon has a 28-day cycle. That makes it really easy. Say, okay, full moon is my period, new moon is my ovulation, and just treat it as such. And then you can kind of still go by a cycle, even if you're not ovulating or bleeding every month. So you really do need to get blood tested at the right time in order to actually see the progression happen. But, you know, don't be disheartened. Just go back to what you were doing before. What was slowly increasing your estrogen levels? And then maybe ask yourself, what has maybe changed since then? Environmentally, it's not just about the food. Food is just one thing. Environmentally, did I change a salt that I was using? Did I get into a relationship where the dude's not treating me well? Did I start a new class this semester? You know, there's so many things that could be. Like, really think back to what changed from when you were implementing things that were increasing your hormone levels, and then all of a sudden they're no longer increasing. What changed? Usually when women really sit down and think about it, there is something that changed. It just was something small that they didn't actually think was important. Sometimes women as simple, like, that's why I always ask if someone has been in a car accident, if someone has had a traumatic event, like a death of a loved one or a death of a pet, like, even those things can affect our health so deeply. And so we have to know that it's not just about the food. Could I make an appointment and meet with you at your office? Do you offer that? Of course, I would pay any amount, LOL. I am actually virtual. I work virtually, either over Skype or over the phone, and I do have a waiting list, so I would recommend you just sending an email to the email that's attached to my account, and you will be intaked within the next month or so. So I do have a long waiting list, but I'm trying to get people in as much as possible. I'm actually changing my program packages, and trying to make it more efficient so I can get more people in. But yeah, send that support at jessicaashwellness.com email. Send an email there, and we will get back to you. Have you heard of DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining System? If so, what are your thoughts? Yeah, I've never heard of that. I'm thinking it's like a nervous system retraining, kind of like biofeedback, but I've never heard of that personally. Or I might have heard of what it is, but I didn't know that it was that term. What do you think about smoothies for meal replacement at times, if they're super nutrient rich, seeds, avocado, etc.? Yeah, I mean, if they work for you, that's totally fine. I think liquid drinks are helpful. But yeah, make sure it's foods that you can break down and digest and absorb properly. And keep them really simple, you guys. A lot of times people just, like, they're like, this is my superfood witch brew, and they're like, I have 85 million health and wellness ingredients in this smoothie, and I'm like, but your gut's really messed up, so what is it that's causing the inflammation? And they're like, I don't really know. And I'm like, yeah, makes sense, right? So keep your ingredients pretty simple so your body can break down and digest things. You've been so helpful, making a lot of sense of what happens with hormones. Thank you. I'm so glad. I try to break it down because at one point in my life, I was in your shoes and nobody did this for me, and I had to figure it out all on my own. I'm 315 pounds and literally nothing is working to get weight off, exercise and low carb, and nothing is coming off. I'm in despair. Make sure your thyroid and your progesterone levels are optimized, which they probably aren't. And don't go low carb. Make sure your meals are balanced. Protein, carbon, fat, protein, carbon, fat, protein, carbon, fat. I will literally say that over and over again. You'll probably hear me say it a million times. And that is because you need protein, carbon, fat to actually open up those fat cells and burn what's inside, whether that's free fatty acids or glucose. What about Ramadan? It's fasting from dusk till dawn, not even consuming water. Well, a lot of people in Ramadan, like pregnant women, are not allowed to fast during Ramadan, and neither are breastfeeding women, I believe. And I think that should be included into hormonally impaired women. But I know it's a religious activity. I understand that. I'm just kind of making a point that there are certain times when fasting is not appropriate. Can adenomyosis be healed naturally? I believe so. I've seen it before. Adenomyosis is just a fancy term for shitty PMS and really heavy clotty periods. And those things are almost always caused by estrogen in relationship to progesterone. And so when someone has adenomyosis diagnosis, I always recommend them getting a Dutch test to see where their estrogen is going down. A lot of times they're not detoxing estrogen well at all, and their progesterone levels are usually in the trash can. So, of course you're going to have awful symptomatic periods, of course. So, it does take time. Estrogen detoxification isn't as easy as just saying like, I'm going to do a detox for 5 days. It's more of like you have to continually do things that are going to open up detoxification pathways, provide your liver with the nutrients it needs, make sure your gut is functioning. A lot of women with adenomyosis or any kind of like endometriosis or even PCOS are chronically constipated. They're just reabsorbing that crap over and over again. Their body's reactivating estrogens, reabsorbing it. So you want to make sure you're having bowel movement quite regularly. Your gut function is good. Things are mobilizing quickly and efficiently through the digestive system, and you have enough progesterone, or you're ovulating even. Some women are not even ovulating. People in the Middle East do it for 30 days once a year. Yeah, I know what Ramadan is, but they eat in the evenings, right? And I just don't think it's effective for people that are not healthy. I don't think it's helpful for them. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you might find yourself getting really low blood sugar and things like that. Is it true that the blood test you get is showing what was happening 3 months prior? When it comes to hemoglobin A1C, yeah, remember that blood is just a snapshot in time. That's why I'm really not a lot of people are like, I feel like absolute crap, like their body's falling apart, but they're like, yeah, my doctor said my hormone levels are normal. And I'm like, are you really going to take that as an answer? Like, who cares? A blood test is just a snapshot at that specific moment when you got your blood tested. And so you need to be like paying attention, checking in with your metabolic markers. That's why I'm a huge fan of temp and pulse, and actually going by your symptoms more than blood tests. Because blood tests are just a snapshot in time. That's all they are. And, who's to say what happened when you got that blood test then is not happening now? You don't know. How do you know? So I think blood tests are kind of, I just bit my tongue, that's why I said that weird. I think blood tests are kind of an archaic way to test people's health. Like, they can be helpful in certain cases, but they're not like end all be all. How do you have a healthy mentality when trying to lose weight with PCOS, coming from a past of eating disorders, and feel shame when I go off my plan to heal my PCOS? Remember that your plan is not a diet. Your plan is your life. This is something that you have to do for a lifetime, and you have to create a sustainable, long-term way of life that's going to last and be enjoyable. You can't live your whole life according to a plan. It just doesn't work, and you'll continually fail. If you're trying to adhere to a plan very hard, you will just set yourself up for failure, and you'll actually do worse than if you just kind of let yourself eat more intuitively. I don't think PCOS plans are helpful because women forget to actually listen to what their body's been trying to tell them, and a lot of times that's what actually gets us into PCOS in the first place. I tracked what I ate in a typical day, and it seems I'm not eating enough. LOLs, how do I eat enough? I was below 1K calories. How do I ensure that I eat enough? Eat 1,500 or 1,700 and get a good idea of what that looks like, and then maybe do that for a couple days. Just track so you understand what that actually looks like, and then eat more. That's how you eat enough. You eat more. So crazy. Heavy cloudy periods mean my estrogen is low? No, it means estrogen is high. So I have cloudy, heavy, debilitating periods, acne, hair loss, crazy high appetite, and no luck losing weight. What should be the first step I do? I would just look through my stories, try to increase progesterone, watch the progesterone story. You really want to be focusing on liver detoxification and just supporting your body overall, but I have a lot of information on that here. Is discharge a sign of ovulation? No. Egg white discharge is a sign of ovulation, but not always, so that's why you need to be tracking your temps. Okay guys, Instagram is cutting me off. Love you. Thank you for joining me. Talk soon.